All right, everyone, we are back on Tier Maker today, which means we are doing some rankings today ahead of our Monday live stream, and more importantly, ahead of this weekend's WrestleMania. We are going to be ranking every single WrestleMania that has happened so far, 1 through 38. Obviously, I am recording this a few days prior to WrestleMania 39. So, we have the 38 past WrestleManias. We are going to rank them based on their quality of matches, their card lineup, how it was received, what it meant for the overall product going forward, and recapping the year in question. We're doing all 1 through 38 on a tier list from S to F. So we'll just start at the beginning. These are out of order here, but we are going to go in order starting with WrestleMania 1. So that out of the way, if you're familiar with my tier rankings or you've seen me do tier rankings before, one thing that I have a habit of doing, and I think it's fair, it's just my own personal opinions, I don't think that giving nostalgia to the first of something is necessarily fair. Just because it started something great, started a trend, doesn't mean that it needs to be just heightened to this level that it isn't actually at. WrestleMania did start this trend of WrestleManias. It started the trend of modern WWE pay-per-views as we know it. Overall, not a phenomenal event in comparison to all other WrestleManias. I mean, it was a pretty basic card. I mean, look at some of these results here and tell me if you've heard of some of these wrestlers. A lot of these you'll have heard of the victor or one of the members or one of the wrestlers on the card, but a lot of the time you have major wrestlers or major personalities facing people that dropped off the face of the planet. Tito Santana, right? You've heard of him. The Executioner. Most people have not heard of the Executioner. King Kong Bundy defeated Special Delivery Jones. You probably haven't heard of him. Ricky Steamboat defeated Matt Bourne. Matt Bourne, more commonly known as Doink the Clown. Brutus Beefcake defeated David Sanmartino. Sorry, did not defeat him. Ended in double disqualification. You don't know David Sanmartino, you know his dad. You would, unless you've watched WrestleMania 1, you have no idea who David Sanmartino is other than Bruno Sammartino's son. Junkyard Dog and Greg Valentine, you probably know both of them. Fair match for the Intercontinental Championship. Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov defeated the U.S. Express for the Tag Team Championship. The card gets better the further along we get in the night, but look at how short most of these matches are. I mean, the longest match in the card is the main event. Second longest match is that Brutus Beefcake and David Sammartino match at 11 minutes and 43 seconds. None of these matches goes more than 15 minutes, which to me is ridiculous, just how long pay-per-views are nowadays. Andre the Giant defeated Big John Studd. Wendy Richter defeated Leilani Kai. This was the Cyndi Lauper match. This was huge. This was the involvement of MTV in this match is part of the reason why WrestleMania was so successful. You often hear of WrestleMania 1 would not have succeeded without celebrity involvement. This was one of them. Cyndi Lauper getting involved in the Wendy Richter match or being a part of the Wendy Richter match. And then obviously Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. With Pat Patterson as a special guest referee and Muhammad Ali was also there. The end of the latter half of this card is very good. The first half of this card is not very good. I think overall rankings, it could probably sit at a B just for what it did for WrestleManias and pay-per-views to come. But just to be safe and fair at the moment, I am only going to place WrestleMania 1. Let me see if I can find the poster here. Where's that? Mr. T right there. I'm going to put it top of C right now. And that could change the further we go along. WrestleMania 2 was bad. All of the momentum coming off of WrestleMania 1 was demolished by WrestleMania 2, and for one fairly solid reason. Several solid reasons, but one major one, and that was they decided to split the card in 3 different locations. So what happened was they took this major wrestling event and they decided to split it up between 3 different arenas. One in New York, Uniondale, that's the Nassau Coliseum where the Islanders used to play. the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, and the Los Angeles Arena, which no longer exists in Los Angeles. So New York, Chicago, LA. And what that did essentially is force the audience in the arena to only watch, however, at most 4 matches in their location. And then as soon as their location was done airing, there were no more matches. And so they would have to watch the rest of the event on the big screen, if there was a big screen video board there, and essentially watch it as a pay-per-view as if they were watching it at home. So they ripped 40,000 people off with serious disappointment. A lot of people were pissed at the way the event was set up. And then you get the main event in Los Angeles, the final match of the entire card, Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, one of the most disappointing WrestleMania matches in WrestleMania history. It was a steel cage match for the WWF Championship. Elsewhere on the card, let's go through it here. Paul Orndorff fought the Magnificent Morocco, so this is Don Morocco. Randy Savage versus George the Animal Steele. Jake Roberts versus George Wells, a wrestler you probably haven't heard of. Mr. T defeated Roddy Piper. So the New York card is actually pretty solid. 3 out of the 4 matches. It's been a while since I actually watched this event specifically, just because it's such a boring event. But I can't remember anything major being disappointing about the New York bit here. Those are pretty solid matches. But then you move on to Chicago. You have Fabulous Moolah defeating Velvet McIntyre, a wrestler you have almost certainly never heard of. Corporal Kirchner defeating Nikolai Volkov. Andre the Giant won an NFL Battle Royal. They got how many wrestlers, or how many? It doesn't say how many, but there was a huge Battle Royal it included WWF wrestlers and NFL or former NFL talent. And obviously the final 2 were both wrestlers. It was Andre the Giant eliminating Bret Hart. Bret Hart being that early on in his career there. British Bulldogs defeated Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. Not horrible, but the first 3 of those matches are all fairly forgettable. And then the LA portion, you got Ricky Steamboat defeating Hercules Hernandez. Adrian Adonis defeating Uncle Elmer. Terry Funk and Haas Funk defeating Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog. And then, of course, that match between Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy. Like I said, the New York portion is not bad, but the event drags on. And the matches aren't even that long. I mean, you look at Fabulous Moolah. Her match was less than a minute and a half. Corporal Kirchner and Nikolai Volkov, just 2 minutes. But the event just feels like it drags so much, and it's super boring, and nothing really happens, and the matches aren't phenomenal, especially after you leave New York. I think this is very low D tier, if not S tier. But for now, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. Where is WrestleMania 2 here? This one, I believe. Bottom of D tier. Okay, WrestleMania 3. Now we pick up the momentum again, and we pretend that WrestleMania 2 never happened. And this is the big one, right? Took place in Detroit at the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. They claimed that 93,000 people were there. It was probably closer to 75,000. It stood as the largest indoor event until 1999 when John Paul II spoke at the Dome in St. Louis. And it was the largest attended WrestleMania until WrestleMania 32, which is also disputed. They claim to have had like 101,000 there, but that also probably is inaccurate. However, on the card, you have 12 matches, all fairly short in length, the longest still being less than 15 minutes. You got the Can-Am Connection defeating Bob Orton, that's Randy Orton's dad, and Don Morocco. Billy Jack Haynes versus Hercules ends in a double countout. Hillbilly Jim, Haiti Kid, Little Beaver defeating King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook. So first 3, you're not off to a great start there. Harley Race defeating Junkyard Dog, not a horrible match, I guess. Dream Team versus the Rougeau brothers. Roddy Piper defeating Adrian Adonis. Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation defeating Tito Santana and the British Bulldogs. pretty decent match if I remember correctly. Like I said, it's been a while since I watched some of these early WrestleManias. Butch Reed defeating Koko Beware. Ricky Steamboat defeating Randy Savage for the Intercontinental Championship. This was a great match. This was the longest match on the card. Honky Tonk Man defeating Jake Roberts. Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov defeating the Killer Bees in kind of a mood reliever ahead of the main event. And then probably not the most famous main event, but for a long time certainly was one of the most iconic main events in WrestleMania history. That's Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, where Hulk Hogan scoop slams Andre the Giant. First time Andre had ever been, well, apart from dark matches, but WWE doesn't want you to know about that. First time Andre the Giant had ever been slammed or pinned on live WWF television. All in all, it's a very average to above average event. The crowd was super into it. Obviously, there were a lot of people there, even if it wasn't as many as they claim to have had there. About half of the matches are less than stellar, but all in all, plus the main event, this WrestleMania, I think, fairly sits in B tier. Where is 3? WrestleMania 4. This is when Hulk Hogan took a little break. This was Ted DiBiase versus Randy Savage in the main event. And where is my results here? Okay, so we had another Battle Royal to start the event. This was the tournament WrestleMania, right? So there was this huge tournament for the vacant WWF Championship. That was when Randy Savage went toward Ted DiBiase, or faced Ted DiBiase in the main event here. And so this entire event kind of operated as a King of the Ring, but instead of the King of the Ring title being the prize, it was the main WWF Championship. So after that Battle Royal, you had a first round match between Ted DiBiase and Jim Duggan. Don Morocco defeated Dino Bravo. Greg Valentine defeated Ricky Steamboat in a great match. Randy Savage defeating Butch Reed. One Man Gang, Bam Bam Bigelow. Jake Roberts versus Rick Rude ended in a time limit draw. And I'm trying to remember. I can't remember how they ended up. Oh, okay. None of them moved on. One Man Gang got a bye in the next round. Okay. And then Ultimate Warrior defeated Hercules in just a singles match to kind of open up the card. And then you had the quarterfinals, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, ending in a double disqualification. Ted DiBiase defeating Don Morocco, Randy Savage defeating Greg Valentine. So if you take a look at the people in this tournament, right, for the most part, you have a really solid set of wrestlers. Jim Duggan is who he is. Ted DiBiase is entertaining, if not the best wrestler. Don Morocco, great. Dino Bravo, yeah. Ricky Steamboat, fantastic. Greg Valentine, fantastic. This match, to me, was the highlight of the entire event. Randy Savage, great. Butch Reed, Bam Bam Bigelow, One Man Gang did well in this tournament. Jake Roberts and Rick Rude, of course, doing phenomenal as well. And so you had a lot of good wrestling, or at least competent wrestlers who gave a lot of energy towards this event. And then you had a singles match for the Intercontinental Championship between Brutus Beefcake and Honky Tonk Man. The Islanders and Bobby Heenan defeating the British Bulldogs and Koko Beware in kind of a palate cleanser match. And then Demolition defeating Strike Force for the Tag Team Championship. And then, of course, the Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase main event. Again, longest match on the card was the 15-minute draw between Jake Roberts and Rick Rude. I would say this WrestleMania is not as good as WrestleMania 3, but I think it definitely surpasses WrestleMania 1. So where are we at here? Let me find... sorry. This is the poster for 4, and this is the poster for 3. It's confusing because they are both on both of them, even though neither of them were in the main event of 4. Okay, let's move on then to WrestleMania 5. This was the Mega Powers exploding. This is one of the best stories heading into WrestleMania in the event's history. Obviously, you have all of the behind-the-scenes stuff between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage that also played out on screen, and because of the way WWE documents its history in a very biased way, we're not entirely sure how much of the behind-the-scenes stuff is true or how much of it is just, what do you want to call it? Faked to enhance the product. A couple dull matches on here to start with. You had Hercules defeating King Haku. Twin Towers defeating the Rockers. This was, I think, Shawn Michaels' first WrestleMania match here. Brutus Beefcake versus Ted DiBiase ends in a double countout. You see a lot of double countouts early on in these WrestleManias. Bushwhackers defeating the Fabulous Rougeaus. Mr. Perfect defeating Owen Hart as the Blue Blazer. This was a pretty good match, if not very short. Demolition defeating the Powers of Pain and Mr. Fuji in a handicap match for the tag team titles. Dino Bravo defeating Ronnie Garvin, a wrestler who about half of you have probably never heard of. Brainbusters defeating Strike Force in a tag team match. That is a horrendous name for a tag team, unless I am 6 years old. Jake Roberts defeating Andre the Giant by disqualification. That was the singles match with Big John Studd as the special guest referee. Hart Foundation defeating Greg Valentine and Honky Tonk Man. Rick Rude defeating the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship. That sets up Ultimate Warrior's run at WrestleMania the following year. Bad News Brown versus Jim Duggan in yet another double countout. This one a double disqualification. The Red Rooster defeating Bobby Heenan. This was Terry Taylor under his Red Rooster gimmick in a 31-second palate cleanser. And then, of course, the big main event between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, in which Hulk Hogan wins. Of course he does. There is a lot of garbage on this card. The main event is, I wouldn't call it spectacular necessarily. It's a great payoff to a phenomenal feud. It's the longest match we had seen at WrestleMania up to that point, just shy of 18 minutes. It's not the greatest wrestling match you've ever seen, but it does wonders to help the memory of WrestleMania 5. However, like I said, there is a lot of garbage on this card. And for that reason, I am going to put it bottom of C tier. I think it gets the benefit of the doubt there. Let's move on to WrestleMania 6. This was the Canada WrestleMania, the first one Edge went to. This was held at the Sky Dome in front of just shy of 68,000 people, now known as the Rogers Center. They have hosted 2 WrestleManias there. And let's see here. We have a dark match at the beginning. Paul Roma defeating the Brooklyn Brawler. You have Rick Martel defeating Coco Beware. Demolition defeating the Colossal Connection in a match for the Tag Team Championship. Earthquake defeating Hercules. Brutus Beefcake defeating Mr. Perfect. Roddy Piper versus Bad News Brown in, you guessed it, a double countout. Hart Foundation defeating the Bolsheviks. That's Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zhukov. The Barbarian defeating Tito Santana. Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire defeating Randy Savage and Queen Sherry. This is, of course, during Savage's breakup with Miss Elizabeth. The Orient Express defeating the Rockers. Another Shawn Michaels WrestleMania match there. Jim Duggan defeating Dino Bravo. Ted DiBiase defeating Jake Roberts for the $1 Million Championship. Big Boss Man defeating Akeem. Rick Rude defeating Jimmy Snuka in the palate cleanser prior to the main event in what was not necessarily a horrible match. And then the Ultimate Warrior defeating Hulk Hogan to not unify, but winner take all the Intercontinental title and the WWF Championship. Now, not horrible matches on this card. It's a very long card. There's 15 matches, which for that time is long in terms of number of matches. The matches weren't necessarily that long, except for the main event. This is now the longest match we've seen up to that point, just shy of 25 minutes. It doesn't have the garbage that WrestleMania 5 had, but you see a lot of great wrestlers carrying not great wrestlers, if that makes any sense. So, Tito Santana versus the Barbarian, or like the Rockers and the Orient Express. Where was another one I saw? Big Boss Man and Akeem, Rick Rude. Jimmy Snuka's not a horrible wrestler, but Rick Rude definitely carried that match. I think this is also pretty average. I'm going to put it above WrestleMania 5, but I'm not going to put it above WrestleMania 1. Okay. Let's move on then to WrestleMania 7. This was the Iraq one. They expected to be able to sell out the Los Angeles Coliseum, and then they could not because Sergeant Slaughter had never headlined a pay-per-view up to that point, let alone WrestleMania. There was not a lot of buzz behind this event, and as a result, they pretended like there were bomb threats, and then they moved the event from the Coliseum to the LA Sports Arena. So a venue of about 70,000 to a venue of about 17,000, of which they only sold about 16,000 tickets. The card here, you have Koko Beware defeating the Brooklyn Brawler in a dark match, the Rockers defeating the Barbarian and Haku. This is Shawn Michaels' first win, I believe, at WrestleMania. Texas Tornado defeating Dino Bravo. British Bulldog defeating the Warlord. Again, you're seeing a lot of experienced wrestlers carrying younger talent or less talented talent. The Nasty Boys defeating the Hart Foundation for the Tag Team Championship. You can tell it's early 90s now. Jake Roberts defeating Rick Martel. The Undertaker in his first WrestleMania match defeating Jimmy Snuka. This started the unintentional trend of what would become the Undertaker's streak. The Ultimate Warrior defeating Randy Savage for a retirement match. Randy Savage, if you don't know the backstory to this, really didn't want to retire, but Vince McMahon kind of forced him into that position. He then became a commentator for a while before leaving, trying his luck at WCW, and then eventually in TNA. But by that point, Savage was kind of at a pretty low point in his life and fell off the rails. He also made an appearance in Spider-Man. Genshiro Tenryu and Koji Katao defeating Demolition. Big Boss Man defeating Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. Earthquake defeating Greg Valentine. Legion of Doom in their first WrestleMania match defeating Power and Glory. That's Paul Roma and Hercules. Virgil defeating Ted DiBiase. The Mountie defeating Tito Santana. And then, of course, the main event, Hulk Hogan wins for the glory of America against that dirty Iraqi, Sergeant Slaughter. In a match that is just shy of 21 minutes long and is not a very good match, believe it or not. This is not a good event. It's notable for a number of reasons. Like I said, I believe this is Shawn Michaels' first win at WrestleMania, and this is Undertaker's first match at WrestleMania. It also marks the end of Randy Savage's career in the early 90s with WWF. But it's pretty boring, and it's not great. And I will give it the benefit of the doubt and put it above WrestleMania 2, but not by much. Okay, WrestleMania 8. Now we are moving into the 90s. WrestleMania 8. That was the main event between Hulk Hogan and Sid. So this is definitely when they're getting into the dark ages of wrestling with the new generation era. The dark match at the beginning is the Bushwhackers defeating the Beverly Brothers. Shawn Michaels defeating Tito Santana. This is after the Rockers, I believe after the Rockers break up. Obviously, he is on his own here in this match. The Undertaker defeating Jake Roberts in his second overall WrestleMania win. Bret Hart defeating Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental Championship. And then you had an 8-man tag match between Big Boss Man, Virgil, Sergeant Slaughter, and Jim Duggan versus the Mountie, the Nasty Boys, and Repo Man. You had Randy Savage defeating Ric Flair for the WWF Championship. Now, keep in mind, Hulk Hogan wanted to main event the event, and so he did. But That means that the WWF Championship match between Ric Flair and Randy Savage went all the way up in 6th, so right about the middle of the card. We could have had Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan. We could have had the main event be Randy Savage against Ric Flair. I did say that Randy Savage was retiring after the last WrestleMania. That's incorrect. That was kind of the position he was forced into. It didn't quite work out. They put him back in the main event, and then his career fizzled out from there. So that's my bad for getting my history wrong for a brief moment there. Otherwise, you got Tatanka defeating Rick Martel in yet another carrying match. Sorry to Tatanka, sorry to all of Tatanka's fans, but Rick Martel definitely helped with that one in a less than 5-minute match. Natural Disasters defeating Money Inc. That's Ted DiBiase and the father of Bray Wyatt for the Tag Team Championship, and then Owen Hart defeating Skinner. This one, also not a great WrestleMania. This one took place in Indianapolis at the Hoosier Dome. It's a bizarre booking choice to put the championship match in the middle, and it didn't work out very well, and it's not a very well-remembered WrestleMania for a number of reasons, but that one pretty significantly overall. This one is also, I think, a D-tier event. I'll put it above everything that we've seen so far, though. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and put it right now at the top of our D-tier. Moving on to one of the worst WrestleManias in history. This is the Caesars Palace one, WrestleMania 9. What is there to say about this one? They decided to do kind of this cool theming idea of ancient Rome with the whole Caesars Palace hosting. But the big story here is you had the main event between Yokozuna and Bret Hart, and then Hulk Hogan coming in to not just give Bret Hart a rematch, but win the title for himself in a 22-second match, where essentially you short-term bury Bret Hart, who was the champion at the time. You give Yokozuna the win over Bret Hart, and then Hulk Hogan comes in and defeats Yokozuna in 22 seconds to basically prove that Bret Hart ain't that. He's not that guy, pal. Hulk Hogan's still that guy. This is also when Hulk Hogan was going through his contract disputes with the WWF, and Vince McMahon is trying to figure out ways to keep him in the business before he runs off to WCW, and this is one way they tried to get him to stick around. Obviously, it didn't work in the end, but this took place in 1993, and in the next couple years, you saw Hulk Hogan take over the world as a member of the NWO in WCW. Elsewhere on the card, Tito Santana carrying Papa Shango in a dark match. Tatanka defeating Shawn Michaels by countout for the Intercontinental Championship. Steiner Brothers making their first WrestleMania appearance against the Head Shrinkers. Doink the Clown defeating Crush in a match that I don't want to watch. Razor Ramon defeating Bob Backlund. I believe this is Razor Ramon's first WrestleMania match, but don't quote me on that. Money Inc. defeating the Mega Maniacs. That's Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. Don't worry, Hulk Hogan has 2 matches on this card for the Tag Team Championship. Lex Luger in his first WrestleMania match defeating Mr. Perfect. The Undertaker defeating Giant Gonzalez in his 3rd overall match. However, this is the one that kind of muddies those criteria because Giant Gonzalez did get disqualified. Technically, he was the last man standing in the match because he basically chloroformed Undertaker and forced the disqualification. So the Undertaker did win, but not in fashionable circumstances. So the record books would like you to look over that one. And then you had, of course, the main events between Yokozuna, Bret Hart, and Hulk Hogan. F tier. There were a lot of problems with this card, but most of all, it was just the bizarre booking decision to bury Bret Hart on behalf of Yokozuna and then bury Yokozuna on behalf of the American hero, Hulk Hogan. It's also just a boring event, so go watch it if you want to be bored and fall asleep. WrestleMania 10, the start of the purple WrestleManias. This one took place in Madison Square Garden in kind of recognition for the 10 years of WrestleManias prior. What is on the card in this one here? you have in a dark match the Heavenly Bodies. This is Tom Pritchard and Jimmy Del Rey alongside Jim Cornette defeating the Bushwhackers. This is the Owen Hart, Bret Hart saga, right? So they face each other essentially to... It's a family grudge match, and so you have Owen going over Bret here in the main event to prove who the better brother is, but then, of course, Bret Hart comes back at the end and defeats Yokozuna to make up for his shortcomings the previous year at WrestleMania. Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon defeating Doink the Clown and Dink the Clown in a match that I really don't want to watch. Randy Savage defeating Crush in another match I don't care about. Alundra Blaze making her WrestleMania debut, defeating Leilani Kai. Men on a Mission, because they're men on a mission, defeating the Quebecers for the Tag Team Championship. Yokozuna defeating Lex Luger. This was... so going into this event, Lex Luger and Bret Hart basically flipped a coin to see who would face Yokozuna first at WrestleMania. The whole storyline behind this is they tied at the Royal Rumble, and so they both got a title match, and Lex Luger won the coin toss, and he decided, like the brilliant man he is, that he was going to challenge first. So, of course, he loses, and then Earthquake defeats Atom Bomb in a palate cleanser match that's 35 seconds long. Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in arguably the match of the night for the Intercontinental Championship. And then, of course, Bret Hart defeating Yokozuna in Yokozuna's second match of the night and Bret Hart's second match of the night, 10 minutes, 38 seconds. But I think the highlight of this entire event, first of all, this opening match, I lied to you. This opening match is the match of the night, but Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels comes very, very tight second. I think this is probably the best WrestleMania we've seen to that point. I don't think it's A tier, but I am definitely going to put it top of B tier. WrestleMania 11. We're getting to the WrestleManias in the early to mid 90s where I kind of forget what happens. And of course, this is the main event that featured Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow in a great carry job by Bigelow. But look at this card here. The Allied Powers, this is Lex Luger and the British Bulldog making a World War II reference 50 years later against the Blue Brothers in a tag team match that does not last 7 minutes. Razor Ramon defeating Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental Championship. This is Jeff Jarrett's WrestleMania debut. Undertaker defeating King Kong Bundy in a continuation of his streak. Is this number 4 for him? I think it's number 4. Owen Hart and Yokozuna teamed up to defeat the Smoking Guns for the Tag Team Championship. Bret Hart defeating Bob Backlund in an I Quit match. Diesel defeating Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. He already held the title. I shouldn't say he defeated him for it. He defended it against Shawn Michaels successfully. This absolutely should have been the main event, but of course they wanted as much celebrity involvement as possible. So you got Lawrence Taylor in a match backed up by Carl Banks, Ricky Jackson, Steve McMichael, Ken Norton Jr., Chris Spielman, and my guy Reggie White. Against Bam Bam Bigelow in an incredible carry job. Also ringside in that was King Kong Bundy, Ted DiBiase, Bray Wyatt Sr., Tatanka, and Nikolai Volkov. This is one of those cases. The title should have absolutely gone on last, but they needed the celebrity involvement. And so they had Lawrence Taylor, the linebacker for the New York Giants, main event WrestleMania alongside Bam Bam Bigelow. I think this event is bottom of C tier. I'm not a huge fan of that event. WrestleMania 12. This is when we start to get a little better. This is 1996. Just whacked my microphone. Perfect. This, of course, is the one where Shawn Michaels defeats Bret Hart in the 60-man Iron Man match that MJF and Daniel Bryan have only tried to replicate. I'm kidding. There were two dark matches prior to the event. It was the Body Donnas defeating the Godwins in a match I don't want to watch. The Huckster versus Nacho Man, two people who I have never heard of. Oh, that's just Ted Turner. Okay. Oh, never mind. Yeah, okay. This was a comedy match. I have never watched the first two matches on this card. The British Bulldog, Owen Hart, and Vader defeating Ahmed Johnson, Jake Roberts, and Yokozuna in a six-man tag match. Roddy Piper defeating Goldust in Goldust's WrestleMania debut. Steve Austin defeating Savio Vega in what would be the start of his tremendous run. Ultimate Warrior defeating Triple H in Triple H's WrestleMania debut. Undertaker defeating Diesel to go 5-0 at WrestleMania. And then, of course, that main event, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Not a weak card by any means. Actually, a fairly strong one, especially given the fact that you only have 6 matches on the main card. I don't think there's really a weak one on here. I would argue that this is probably... This might be... I still like 10 better, so I'm going to put this just under WrestleMania 10. But I think 12 is a very strong WrestleMania. Let's move on to 13 then. This, of course, is the one I was thinking of with the Bret Hart-Steve Austin match, where Steve Austin doesn't give up. You do a tremendous double turn, which are very rare and very hard to pull off. You have a free match at the beginning between Billy Gunn and Flash Funk, and then the card starts 7 matches. 4-way elimination match to determine number 1 contenders for the Tag Team Championship. That's the Headbangers defeating Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon, the Godwins, and the New Blackjacks. Blackjack Bradshaw. I do not remember that gimmick. Rock. That is Dwayne Johnson as Rocky Maivia in his WrestleMania debut, successfully defending the Intercontinental Championship against the Sultan. Triple H in his first WrestleMania win against Goldust. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog defending their Tag Team Championship against Mankind and Vader. Mick Foley in his WrestleMania debut. This is the incredible double turn, one of the best WrestleMania matches ever between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin at 22 minutes. Match of the night. Ahmed Johnson and the Legion of Doom defeating the Nation of Domination in a Chicago racist street fight. And then, of course, you have Sid main eventing WrestleMania for the second time, which is really sad. This is absolutely not the match of the night, but Undertaker moves on to, I believe, 6-0 after this to win his second WWF Championship. Second, maybe third. I think this is a pretty average card, apart from the double turn. I'll give it some credit for the double turn, so we'll put it top of C tier here. I can't seem to move that one over, so we'll put 13 top of C tier. 14. This is when we get into the Attitude Era officially. We have the main event between Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels with Mike Tyson as the special enforcer. Of course, you had Mike Tyson being a member of DX and then flipping on Shawn Michaels to be a part of the Steve Austin train. At the start of the match, you had LOD 2000, the Legion of Doom, defeating the Midnight Express in a tag team battle royal to determine the number 1 contenders to the tag team title. Taka Michinoku defeating Aguila in a bizarre light heavyweight championship match. Triple H defeating Owen Hart for the European title. Mark Merrow and Sable defeating Goldust and Luna Vachon. The Rock alongside the Nation of Domination defeating Ken Shamrock to retain his Intercontinental title. Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie defeating the New Age Outlaws for the Tag Team Championship. Undertaker defeating Kane in a singles match. That is Kane's WrestleMania debut. And then, of course, the main event between Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, as I mentioned before. I think this is a pretty strong card. Taka Michinoku being on a WrestleMania card is bizarre. Triple H, Owen Hart, fairly good match. Rock versus Ken Shamrock, not a bad match. I would say... All right, I will put 13 in B tier, and I'll put 14 right below it in C tier. WrestleMania 15. We are moving on now to Philadelphia, and this was 1999. Main event was, of course, Steve Austin defeating The Rock in the first of their 3 WrestleMania matches. You had 2 matches on the pre-card. Jacqueline defeating Ivory in the mandatory women's match, I guess you could call it. D'Lo Brown and Test winning a battle royal to determine number 1 contenders to the tag team titles. That was when Draws and The Godfather eliminated each other. You're not missing much if you skip this pre-show. Hardcore Holly defeating Al Snow and Billy Gunn in a triple threat match for the Hardcore Championship. Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett defending the tag team championships against D'Lo Brown and Test. Butterbean defeating Bart Gunn in the Brawl for All match. If you're not aware of the backstory to this idea, this was it Vince Russo who had this idea? So one of the head writers for WWF at the time decided he was going to do an actual boxing series on WWF television. Shoot fights, so not pre-planned. It was absolutely beat your opponent up and try to win for real. It didn't go very well. They did not expect Bart Gunn to get as far as he did. He made it to the final against actual professional boxer Butterbean, who beat the snot out of him in 35 seconds. It was an uncomfortable watch. It continues to be an uncomfortable watch. It continues to be a bad idea. So thank you, Vince Russo, for the Brawl for All. After that, Mankind defeated Big Show. Was that Big Show's WrestleMania debut? It might be if I haven't been paying attention already. Road Dogg defeating Goldust, Ken Shamrock, and Val Venus in a 4 corners elimination match for the Intercontinental title. Kane defeating Triple H. Sable defeating Tori for the women's title. Shane McMahon defeating X-Pac for the European title. The Undertaker defeating Big Boss Man in one of the most uncomfortable matches you will ever watch. This, of course, is the match where after he beats Big Boss Man, he hangs him in the cell. Yeah, questionable booking decisions on this card all around. And then, of course, Steve Austin versus The Rock. So you have some pretty significant historical matches on here, but you also have a lot of bad booking decisions and questionable choices, like I mentioned, the Undertaker Big Boss Man fight and the Brawl for All. So I think this goes pretty low C tier. Oh, man. Let's put it above the Mega Powers. No, you know what? I'll put it... No, that is 6. Okay, I thought that said 4 for a second. Yeah, we'll put it above the Mega Powers. WrestleMania 16 or WrestleMania 2000 took place in Anaheim. Let's see. This was, of course, the 4-way elimination match with a McMahon in every corner. 9 matches on the card. Big Boss Man and Bull Buchanan defeating The Godfather and D'Lo Brown in a 9-minute tag match. Hardcore Holly winning a battle royal for the Hardcore Championship against Crash Holly. TNA, that's Test and Prince Albert, defeating Head Cheese, that's Al Snow and Cheese Blackman. Thank you, Steve Blackman. In a fairly skippable tag team match. Edge and Christian making their WrestleMania debut. This, of course, is the Triangle Ladder match, one of the greatest ladder matches of all time, between Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys that started the TLC trend. We have them to thank for a bad series of pay-per-views. Terry Runnels defeating The Cat in a cat fight. Thank you, women. China and Too Cool defeating The Radicals in a 6-person intergender tag team match. You had a 2-fall triple threat match for the Intercontinental and European Championships. That is, of course, Chris Benoit defeated Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle in the first fall for the Intercontinental title, and then Chris Jericho defeating Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle for the European title. Kane and Rikishi defeating D-Generation X in a tag team match that's fairly skippable at only 4 minutes. And then, of course, the main event between Triple H alongside Stephanie defeating The Rock with Mr. McMahon, Mick Foley alongside Linda McMahon, and Big Show alongside Shane. Not a bad event at all. Of course, it gets super brownie points for match 4 on the card here. I'm going to put this bottom of B tier. we still haven't hit an A-tier WrestleMania, and maybe that's on me. But this next one is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Of course, this is WrestleMania X7. WrestleMania X7 had a controversial ending when Stone Cold Steve Austin turned heel. However, everything else in this event is pretty spectacular. You had a dark match between X Factor and Steve Blackman and Grandmaster Sexay. Skippable, it's a dark match. But then you get the card rolling with Chris Jericho defeating William Regal in a solid match for the Intercontinental title. You had Taz and the APA defeating Right to Censor in not a great match, but a fun, slight comedic. I liked the angle. That's just me. Kane defeating Raven in Raven's WrestleMania debut for the Hardcore Championship. Eddie Guerrero in his WrestleMania debut defeating Test for the European Championship. Kurt Angle defeating Chris Benoit. Chyna defeating Ivory. I mean, I like every single one of those matches. Shane McMahon defeating Mr. McMahon. This is, of course, when Linda rises from her wheelchair and kicks Mr. McMahon in the nuts for the loudest pop of the night. Edge and Christian defeating the Dudleys and the Hardys in yet another TLC match. This is TLC 2. This is the one that solidified TLC as like the next big thing. This is a phenomenal match. This is, if I called the last one the best ladders match ever, I absolutely meant this one. The first one was good, but this one is phenomenal. 15 and a half minutes long. Arguably match of the night. Of course, then you had that main event, but we'll get to that. Iron Sheik defeating Hillbilly Jim in a palate cleanser battle royal. And then, of course, you have Undertaker defeating Triple H in a 19-minute long singles match. And then the main event where Steve Austin does the unthinkable to defeat The Rock for the title by teaming with Vince McMahon and The Authority. Oh my gosh, I need to watch that WrestleMania again because it is so good. This is absolute S tier. It's probably the best WrestleMania ever. Then we move on to WrestleMania X8 or WrestleMania 18. This was Hulk Hogan versus The Rock in the best part-timer match of all time. Dark match to start. You had Rikishi, Scotty 2 Hotty, and Albert defeating Mr. Perfect, Lance Storm, and Test. You can skip it. It's a dark match. Rob Van Dam, his WrestleMania debut against William Regal. He defeats him for the Intercontinental Championship. DDP, his WrestleMania debut. Of course, this is after the WWF acquired WCW and took a lot of their talent in. He defeats Christian in Christian's debut singles match at WrestleMania. Maven defeating Goldust, or actually versus Goldust, ending with a, what do you want to call it? Not disqualification, but kind of a weird twist ending. It's only 3 minutes long. You could probably skip it. It doesn't really go anywhere. Kurt Angle defeating Kane. Undertaker defeating Ric Flair to continue his streak. Edge defeating Booker T in Booker T's WrestleMania debut. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeating Scott Hall in a pretty lackluster match with everything going on around it. Billy and Chuck, don't forget that homophobia was strong in 2001. Is this 2001 or 2002? 2002, excuse me. This is, of course, everyone's favorite gay couple, Billy and Chuck, defeating the APA, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys to continue on their reign as tag team champions. The Rock defeating Hollywood Hulk Hogan in the match that should have been the main event, but of course, Triple H always gets his way with a long match for the title in the main event spot. But before that, we have a palate cleanser that's actually a pretty solid match. This is when women kind of started to be taken a little more seriously as actual wrestlers. You had the talented Trish Stratus and Lita going up unsuccessfully against Jazz for the WWF Women's Championship. So calling it a palate cleanser is not necessarily correct. It was very good match, if not very short. They gave women just enough on that card to kind of prove what women could do and spark what would, in a very, very long time, become the women's revolution. And then, of course, the main event between Triple H and Chris Jericho for the undisputed WWF Championship. A match, while not bad, was very long and should absolutely not have been the main event. That, of course, should have gone to The Rock and Hulk Hogan. in a very, very loud, crowd active match there. I would say this is absolutely an A-tier WrestleMania. Moving on to WrestleMania 19. This is the Brock Lesnar neck one. Took place in Seattle at Safeco Field, home of the Seattle Mariners. And, of course, on this card, you have, for the very first time, the main eventers using their actual names, both of them. We started with the dark match. Guess what you can do? You can skip it. Chief Morley and Lance Storm defeating Kane and Rob Van Dam for the Tag Team Championship. Matt Hardy defeating Rey Mysterio in Rey Mysterio's WrestleMania debut for the Cruiserweight title. Undertaker defeating Big Show and A-Train in a handicap match to continue his WrestleMania streak. Trish Stratus defeating Victoria and Jazz, in a triple threat match for the Women's Championship. Team Angle, which was Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin in Shelton Benjamin's WrestleMania debut, defeating Chris Benoit and Rhino and Los Guerreros in a triple threat tag match for the Tag Team Championship. This is the WWE Tag Championships, not the World Tag Team Champion. Nobody wants to watch the World Tag Team Championships. This is, of course, after the brand split. So you had a World Heavyweight Championship match. Before that, it was Shawn Michaels defeating Chris Jericho, and then a World Heavyweight Championship match between Triple H and Booker T. Hulk Hogan defeating Mr. McMahon in a street fight that was very long and actually fairly forgettable. Then, of course, you have The Rock defeating Stone Cold Steve Austin in the third of their trilogy matches at WrestleMania, and then the main event between Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, where Brock Lesnar, of course, does the shooting star press on a slippery top rope, does not do the turn correctly, lands on his neck and almost dies, but Kurt Angle carries the rest of the match, and in fact, Brock Lesnar does become WWE Champion. I think this is a pretty solid WrestleMania. I'm tempted to put it A tier, but if I put WrestleMania 10, you know what? I'm going to move WrestleMania 10 to A tier, and I will also then put 19 in A tier right below it. Moving on to WrestleMania 20. Now, I am not going to dock points for what happened to Chris Benoit later in his life, or I suppose at the end of his life. Moving his work in the ring aside from who he was and ended up being as a person. This is a phenomenal main event. You had a beautiful ending to this event with Chris Benoit defeating Triple H and Shawn Michaels in a glorious 32-minute long triple threat match. I haven't quite been keeping track, but I believe that's the longest match we had seen. No, sorry, there was the 60-minute Iron Man match. That is the longest non-Iron Man match that we had seen up to that point. You had 12 matches on the card. It started strong. It's Big Show, so it's as strong as it's going to be. But John Cena making his WrestleMania debut. This is 2004. John Cena defeating Big Show in 9 minutes for the U.S. title. Rob Van Dam and Booker T maintaining their hold on the World Tag Team Championship over Garrison Cade and Mark Jindrak. I have never heard of Garrison Cade. The Dudley Boys and La Resistance. Christian defeating Chris Jericho in a Canadians match. Evolution is a mystery. Defeating the Rock and Sock Connection in a handicap match. Tori Wilson and Sable defeating Miss Jackie and Stacy Keibler in a Playboy evening gown match. This is when WWE decided that women were getting too good at wrestling. You gotta settle down, women. People don't want to watch you wrestle. They want to see you do a Playboy evening gown match in 3 minutes or less. Sixth match on the card is Chavo Guerrero. Ooh, Chavo. Maintaining his hold on the Cruiserweight Championship over Akio, Billy Kidman, Funaki, Jamie Noble, Nunzio, Rey Mysterio, Shannon Moore, Tajiri, and Ultimo Dragon. That is a Cruiserweight Open, which I do not remember very well. It's been a long time since I watched WrestleMania 20. Goldberg defeating Brock Lesnar in the match that was booed out of the building. This, of course, both men were on their way out of the company. Goldberg wanted to retire, and Brock Lesnar wanted to play professional football. And both of those things went very well for both of them. So the fans were super against this match. They booed him out of the building. Both men were clearly rattled by the audience. But Stone Cold Steve Austin was, in fact, the guest referee. This is after he had retired. Next match was a fatal four-way for the tag team championship. Too Cool retained against the world's greatest tag team, that is Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, the Basham Brothers, and the APA. Victoria defeating Molly Holly in a hair versus title match. Don't worry, women still aren't able to wrestle. Stephanie McMahon hasn't invented women's wrestling yet. Eddie Guerrero defeating Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship in a solid match. This was the start of what was a beautiful night for Eddie and his friend Chris Benoit. Next, Undertaker defeats Kane in their second WrestleMania match to continue the Undertaker's streak. And then, of course, in the main event is that beautiful triple threat match. Now, like I said, all things aside from Chris Benoit and what he would become, I think this is a solid A-tier WrestleMania. I will put it at the bottom of A tier, though. Okay, moving on to WrestleMania 21. This is WrestleMania Goes Hollywood. This is the Batista one. So the final fall of Evolution. Batista challenging Triple H in the main event. You had a pre-show. It's a battle royal, so it depends if you like battle royals or not. But you might want to watch this one. Booker T won by last eliminating Chris Masters. Rey Mysterio defeating Eddie Guerrero in a singles match. This was ahead of their very personal. I think this was that the feud continued on through SummerSlam, and that's when we got the custody on a pole match. It's actually a ladders match, I know, but that was when we officially learned that Dominic Mysterio was in fact Eddie's biological son, but Rey maintained custody. So never forget that. Ex-Con Dom is in fact Eddie Guerrero's actual son, according to WWE in 2005. Edge defeating Chris Jericho, Shelton Benjamin, Chris Benoit, and Christian and Kane in a 4-on-2 Canadians versus Americans match. I'm just kidding. This is the very first Money in the Bank ladder match. I forgot it happened that early. The Undertaker defeating Randy Orton to continue his streak. Trish Stratus defeating Christy Hemme in a singles match for the Women's Championship. This is actually not a bad match. It's very short, though. Kurt Angle defeating Shawn Michaels by submission in the longest match on the card. Akebono defeating Big Show. This was, of course, the sumo match where we got to see Big Show's big booty. It's skippable. It's 1 minute long. John Cena defeating JBL for the WWE Championship. And then, of course, Batista defeating Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. This isn't a bad card, especially given the fact you have the Money in the Bank ladder match. You have Rey versus Eddie, but everything else on the card, for the most part, I mean, the title matches are good, don't get me wrong, but compared to the run of WrestleManias that they had been having, this was the first stumbling block after the Attitude Era, and the highest I can put this is B tier. And if I put WrestleMania 18 at B tier, I have to put this one C tier. So I am going to put this above 4. Okay. Next, we have WrestleMania 22. Now, this is the confusing one because the poster has John Cena and Booker T on it, but Booker T has never main evented a WrestleMania. This, of course, was Cena versus Triple H. So, for whatever reason, they decided to put Booker T on the poster. This took place in Chicago. You had a dark match that you can absolutely skip. Another battle royal, but this one, Viscera won by last eliminating Snitsky. 6 minutes long. Feel free to skip it. Big Show and Kane defeating Carlito and Chris Masters in a tag team match to start off the main card. Rob Van Dam winning the Money in the Bank ladder match over Bobby Lashley, Finlay, Matt Hardy, Ric Flair, don't forget, was in the Money in the Bank ladder match that year, and Shelton Benjamin. The U.S. title match between Chris Benoit and JBL goes to JBL. Not a bad match by any means. Edge defeating Mick Foley in a hardcore match. The Boogeyman defeating Booker T and Queen Sharmell. Don't forget, Booker T's on the poster. But yeah, let's put him against the Boogeyman in an intergender handicap match that's less than 4 minutes long. Mickie James defeating Trish Stratus for the Women's Championship match in a fairly solid, less than 9-minute bout. This is still, of course, before Stephanie McMahon has invented women's wrestling, so you kind of got to give it the benefit of the doubt there. But I think it's a pretty good match. Mickie James making her debut at WrestleMania. Undertaker defeating Mark Henry in a casket match. This, in my opinion, is actually one of the Undertaker's more forgettable matches. It's not bad by any means, but I do tend to forget that he faced Mark Henry at WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels defeating Mr. McMahon in a no-holds-barred match. Rey Mysterio defeating Kurt Angle and Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight Championship. This is, of course, the year that he won Money in the Royal Rumble. So this is probably the highlight of the entire event. Tori Wilson defeating Candice Michelle in the best women's match on the card, a 4-minute long Playboy pillow fight. Because we can never get enough of those. And then John Cena defeating Triple H in a singles match. This isn't a bad card, but it sits between where am I going to put it? I'll put it, I think it's less good than the previous year, and I'm going to put it below WrestleMania 1. Because the next year was WrestleMania 23, and I love WrestleMania 23. This took place in Detroit. It was the first of what would become their traditional stadium show, WrestleManias. This, of course, was at Ford Field. The main event here was between John Cena and Shawn Michaels in a decent match. Of course, at the start of this match, you have a guy jump into the ring and the cameras cut away, but then you see Shawn Michaels waving to him when the cameras come back onto the ring, which was entertaining. Two really, really solid matches on this card that I want to point out. The Undertaker defeating Batista in what is arguably the Undertaker's greatest non-Shawn Michaels match. In fact, I think it is The Undertaker's best non-Shawn Michaels match. CM Punk's match with him is pretty good as well. But that is phenomenal, and so is the hair versus hair match. Of course, this is Bobby Lashley versus Umaga, but it's really Donald Trump defeating Vince McMahon and then shaving Vince McMahon's head afterwards, and Donald Trump drinks his very first beer in his entire life after 13 minutes. This was the selling point of the entire event. But at the beginning, you have a dark match between Ric Flair and Carlito, defeating Gregory Helms and Chavo. Mr. Kennedy defeating CM Punk, Randy Orton, Finlay, Matt Hardy, King Booker, Jeff Hardy, and Edge in the Money in the Bank ladder match. Of course, he would go on to drop the briefcase to Edge. Whoops, I accidentally clicked on Randy Orton there. You have Great Khali defeating Kane in a skippable 5.5-minute match. Chris Benoit defeating Montel Vontavious Porter for the U.S. Championship. Chris Benoit, his match is always entertaining. Of course, this was his final WrestleMania match before he would go on to do disastrous things. Undertaker defeating Batista in my favorite match of the night. ECW Originals, then, that is Rob Van Dam, Tommy Dreamer, Sabu, and the Sandman defeating The New Breed. That is Elijah Burke, Marcus Corvan, Matt Stryker, the announcer, and Kevin Thorne in an 8-man tag team match that you can skip. Bobby Lashley defeating Umaga, of course, in the hair versus hair match, which is always entertaining as well. Melina defeating Ashley in the only women's match on the card. This is a Lumberjill match for the WWE Women's Championship, of course, prior to Stephanie McMahon inventing women's wrestling. And then, of course, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels in a very good, very entertaining bout, but to me, not the best card, or not the best match on the card. But I think this is absolutely A-tier WrestleMania. I am going to put it just shy of WrestleMania 18 in A-tier. WrestleMania 24 is another great one. This, of course, took place in Orlando. This is the Big Show Floyd Mayweather one. It's also the Ric Flair one. Don't forget about that. This is one of the best WrestleManias, in my opinion. You had a dark match, battle royal at the beginning to determine the number one contender for an ECW championship. It's a battle royal, but I don't think you need to skip this one. This is Kane last eliminating Mark Henry. Two big men slapping meat. JBL defeating Finlay in a Belfast brawl. I think you can actually skip that one of any of them. CM Punk winning his first of his back-to-back Money in the Bank ladder matches, over Shelton Benjamin, Chris Jericho, Carlito, MVP, Mr. Kennedy, and John Morrison making his WrestleMania debut. A Battle for Brand Supremacy singles match. This is, of course, before bragging rights and before Survivor Series became Brand Supremacy. This is Batista defeating Umaga. Singles match for the ECW Championship between Kane and Chavo Guerrero. It was 11 seconds long. You could kind of skip this one. Shawn Michaels defeating Ric Flair. I always forget it happened that early on in the card. Ric Flair, of course, went on to retire before wrestling at nearly 80 years old and passing out in a match featuring Jeff Jarrett and Andrade. Don't forget about that. Beth Phoenix and Melina defeating Maria and Ashley in a Playboy Bunny Mania Lumberjill tag team match before, of course, Stephanie McMahon invented women's wrestling, and I'm going to run that joke into the ground. Randy Orton defeating Triple H and John Cena in a triple threat match for the WWE Championship. Randy Orton and Triple H would go on to face each other the following year in a horrible main event. The big celebrity match between Floyd Mayweather and The Big Show is one of the best celebrity involvement matches you will see. And then, of course, the best match on the card, including the Shawn Michaels Ric Flair match, the best match on the card between Undertaker and Edge. This is a solid event, and I don't think it's quite as good as 23 in my opinion, but I think it is literally right on the back door of 23. WrestleMania 25, also known as the 24th anniversary of WrestleMania, despite what Vince McMahon thinks. This took place in Houston, so of course there was a lot of buzz. The previous and only WrestleMania to take place in Houston before this was 17, the best WrestleMania. This was in front of over 72,000 fans. It was nearly 1 million buys, and it was a very disappointing card. Pre-show, you had the Clones defeating John Morrison and The Miz to unify the WWE and World Tag Team Championships. It's not skippable necessarily. CM Punk winning his second of his back-to-back Money in the Bank ladder matches against Christian, Finlay, Kane, Kofi Kingston, Mark Henry, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin. And then, of course, the start of the Women's Revolution, one of the greatest women's matches in WWE history. Santina Marella, of course, the twin sister of Santino Marella, becoming the very first and so far, I believe, only Miss WrestleMania, as Santina last eliminates Beth Phoenix to be crowned the best woman in all of WWE. And then, of course, Chris Jericho defeating Jimmy Snuka, Ricky Steamboat, and Roddy Piper in a Chris Jericho is going to stomp these old men into the ground handicap elimination match. Matt Hardy defeating Jeff Hardy in an Extreme Rules match that, to be honest, I don't like that much. Rey Mysterio defeating JBL for the Intercontinental title. Undertaker defeating Shawn Michaels in the best WrestleMania match, the best WWE match of all time. If there is one highlight on this card, it is that match. Otherwise, the card is pretty barren and not very well executed. You had John Cena defeating Big Show and Edge in a triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship. And then, of course, one of the most boring main events in history, between Triple H and Randy Orton that goes 25 minutes and doesn't go anywhere. It is a slog. It is boring. It is one of the worst WrestleMania main events ever. This one is going to go D tier, top of D tier. It's that bad. I mean, you have the best WWE match of all time, but it doesn't make up for the fact that it's sitting right in the middle of the card and the rest of the card sucks. Phoenix, WrestleMania 26. This was the Shawn Michaels retirement WrestleMania. This absolutely was booked correctly. This should have been the final match, and it was. Thank goodness. You had an opening match, Battle Royal between, featuring Yoshitatsu and Zack Ryder. This is, of course, the first of the 2010s WrestleManias, so you get more of that new age reality era talent. You could skip it. It's a pre-show main event. Sorry, I accidentally clicked a link there. You had Show Miz. Don't forget the Miz and Big Show were a tag team holding the titles over John Morrison and R-Truth. Randy Orton defeating the rest of Legacy in a triple threat match. Jack Swagger winning Money in the Bank, never forget, over Christian, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, Evan Bourne, Kane, Kofi Kingston, Matt Hardy, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin. MVP and Shelton Benjamin are in this match every single year. Triple H defeating Sheamus. Oh, I should mention, this was the last of the Money in the Bank ladder matches to take place at WrestleMania. Of course, later on in the year, they would make the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Triple H defeating Sheamus in a singles match that doesn't really go anywhere. Rey Mysterio defeating CM Punk. Would he have lost? He would have had to join the Straight Edge Society. Bret Hart defeating Mr. McMahon in a really, really sad and misjudged match. I would skip this one if I were you. Chris Jericho defeating Edge in a Canadians for the World Heavyweight Championship match. Alicia Fox, Layla, Maurice, Michelle McCool, and Vicky Guerrero defeating Beth Phoenix, Eve Torres, Gail Kim, Kelly Kelly, and Mickie James in a 10-diva tag team match prior to women knowing how to wrestle. That's because Stephanie hadn't invented it yet. John Cena defeating Batista by submission. Not a bad match by any means. It's only 13 and a half minutes long, but of course, the highlight of this entire event is The Undertaker defeating Shawn Michaels. Who did I just click on? I have no idea who I just had my cursor over. But yeah, not as good as their match the previous year, but absolutely more emotional. They had been setting this up for months. You saw drama at the Royal Rumble. Yeah, very, very good main event. The rest of the card, kind of less so. I would say this is a pretty solid C-tier WrestleMania. I'm going to put it above 21. 27 is bad. 27 is really bad. In fact, this might be worse than 9. In fact, it is worse than 9. So we will put it all the way at the bottom, and then we will explain why. WrestleMania 27, this was the Atlanta one. The Rock was brought back as the host. You had 2 dark matches at the beginning. Sheamus versus Daniel Bryan, which ended in a no contest. Of course, this would go on to feed their match the following year, which started the Yes Movement. We'll get to that when we talk about 28. And then Great Khali winning a battle royal over Sheamus. Skip. Edge started off the event defeating Alberto Del Rio and then destroying his car like the good babyface he is. This was the singles match for the heavyweight championship. Alberto Del Rio had won the Royal Rumble that year. Cody Rhodes defeating Rey Mysterio in a singles match. This was Cody Rhodes at the time wearing his mask. Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, and Santino Marella. Now remember, that's Santina Marella's twin brother, defeating The Core in an 8-man tag team match. This is the remnants of the Nexus. Randy Orton defeating CM Punk in a singles match. The new Nexus were banned from ringside. The best match on the card, that is Michael Cole defeating Jerry Lawler by disqualification, featuring Stone Cold Steve Austin in a special guest referee spot. Michael Cole, remember, still undefeated at WrestleMania, of course. The Undertaker defeating Triple H in the first of their back-to-back matches. Of course, at the end of this match, The Undertaker was unable to stand and had to be helped out of the ring. But he still won. This was 30 minutes long. Of course it was. It's Triple H. And then the second best match on the card. This is John Morrison, Snooki, and Trish Stratus defeating Dolph Ziggler and Lay Cool in a 6-person mixed tag team match, the best women's match we have seen at WrestleMania in a very long time. And then, of course, the main event, one of the best main events in WrestleMania history between The Miz and John Cena. With The Miz retaining, by the way. Miz defeated John Cena in the main event of WrestleMania. It's bad. It's really bad. There is one redeeming match on this card. This match isn't even that good. It's, of course, the Undertaker Triple H match, which I enjoy their 28 match more. But, yeah, 27 is bad. Let's move on then to 28. So 28 was the first WrestleMania I actually watched. Despite my age, I got into wrestling fairly late. And most of what I know about wrestling is retrospective. So this is when I had started watching live. And part of why I started watching was because it was John Cena versus The Rock. It was a huge deal. It took place in Miami, of course, where The Rock kind of grew up, went to college. This is the exact stadium that he used to play college football in. Don't forget that one pre-show match was streamed on YouTube. The card here is kind of lackluster. A lot of people remember this event very fondly, and it's actually not that good. But we had Primo and Epico in the dark match beforehand, defeating Justin Gabriel and Tyson Kidd and the Usos in a triple threat match for the Tag Team Championship. I believe this is the Usos' WrestleMania debut. This took place in the year 2012. You had the 18 seconds of Daniel Bryan losing his World Heavyweight Championship to Sheamus after he stepped aside and kissed his girlfriend AJ Lee, which would spark the Yes movement, of course. Kane defeating Randy Orton in a forgettable singles match. Big Show defeating Cody Rhodes for the Intercontinental Championship in another fairly forgettable match. Kelly and Maria Menounos in the mandatory celebrity match, defeating Beth Phoenix and Eve Torres. The Undertaker defeating Triple H by pinfall. I think this is the best match on the card. It was nearly 31 minutes long, so it is very long, but it's a Hell in a Cell match. It's very entertaining. A lot of the spots are great, and of course, The Undertaker continues his streak by defeating Triple H for the second year in a row. Then, of course, you have the actual best match on the card, don't get me wrong. Team Johnny, which is David Otunga, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, Jack Swagger, Mark Henry, and The Miz, alongside Brie Bella, John Laurinaitis, and Vicky Guerrero, defeating Team Teddy, which was Booker T, Kofi Kingston, The Great Khali, R-Truth, Santino Marella, that's the twin brother of Santina Marella, by the way, and Zack Ryder alongside Oksana, Eve Torres, Hornswoggle, Nikki Bella, and Teddy Long. It was very skippable. Then, of course, a 25-minute match between CM Punk and Chris Jericho, which is the second best match on the card. And then one of the best storytelling matches or best setup matches on the card, that was The Rock defeating John Cena in just a simple singles match main event, era versus era, legacy versus legacy match. Once in a lifetime, by the way. They would never do that match again. Well, it's very much better than 27. But I think it's still pretty bad. Is it worse than... What is that? Is that 9? Or no, that's 8. No, it's not worse than 8. But I'll put it there. WrestleMania 29. I remember this one very fondly. However, upon rewatch, it's not great. You had the debut of The Shield. In the opening match, you had The Miz defeating Wade Barrett, and I think he lost it the very next night, if I'm not mistaken, on Raw. It's actually not a bad match. I would not recommend you skip that one. The opening match was The Shield defeating The Sword. Don't forget, that is actually what this tag team called themselves. Big Show, Randy Orton, and Sheamus somehow teaming up as good guys to face The Shield. Of course, The Shield won. They had really cool ring gear. They had these face masks that are really, really cool. It was only 10.5 minutes long. And then, of course, Mark Henry defeating Ryback in a singles match, which is fairly forgettable. Team Hell No, that's, of course, Daniel Bryan and Kane defeating Big E Langston and Dolph Ziggler for the Tag Team Championship. The next night on Raw was, of course, the night Dolph Ziggler would cash in his Money in the Bank to one of the loudest crowd reactions in wrestling history. Fandango is undefeated at WrestleMania, never forget, defeating Chris Jericho by pinfall. Alberto Del Rio defeating Jack Swagger in a fairly forgettable World Heavyweight Championship match. They would face each other in a rematch the following night, to which Alberto Del Rio would win again. And then Dolph Ziggler would cash in following that match. The Undertaker defeating CM Punk in my second favorite Undertaker match of all time. Triple H defeating Brock Lesnar. This is, of course, the match where Triple H gets sprayed with dry ice prior to the main event. Or not main event, prior to the match. And he has massive scarring during the match. He defeated Brock Lesnar, but of course Brock Lesnar would come back and smoke him at Extreme Rules the following month. And then in the main event, John Cena defeating The Rock. And the song Coming Home by Diddy always plays in my head. I'm coming home, coming home. This was the singles match for the WWE Championship. John Cena learned from his mistakes the year prior and defeated The Rock. This is the last time we have seen The Rock in an actual wrestling match, apart from, of course, his involvement at WrestleMania 32. It's not great. I am going to put it C tier, and I'll put it right there. Okay, moving on to WrestleMania 30, one of the best WrestleManias of all time. This was the first New Orleans one. This is the Yes Movement Unleashed. Look at that stage. Man, that's pretty. I had a cousin who was actually at this event. He said it was as phenomenal as you think it was. I remember watching it on my basement. Pre-show, you had the Usos before they were entertaining. In a Fatal 4-Way Tag Team Elimination match, they retained their titles against Los Matadores, which were literally just the Colognes dressed as matadors. The Real Americans, don't forget about Cesaro and Jack Swagger being racist, and Rybaxel. Then, of course, the start of the primary show, Daniel Bryan defeating Triple H by pinfall in a match where the winner would be added to the main event as a triple threat. Daniel Bryan, of course, won after several times trying to be knocked out of the ring by Triple H. Then you had the Shield turning face very slowly against Kane and the New Age Outlaws. This was just a month or two prior, I think 2 months prior to Seth Rollins betraying the Shield. So by this point, they were pretty solid faces, or anti-heroes, I guess would be the best way to put it. Then, of course, the first Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, Cesaro won by last eliminating Big Show, basically replicating the Scoop Slam from WrestleMania 3. John Cena defeated Bray Wyatt in a very poorly booked match. Bray Wyatt's WrestleMania debut as well there. Brock Lesnar beating The Undertaker's streak, never forget, in a match that took all of the wind out of the crowd. I really liked the match. However, watching it back, you can tell The Undertaker is very much out of it, very much concussed, and very much past his prime. But because there was no energy in the crowd, they thought this is the perfect time to send out the women. AJ Lee defending her Divas Championship against Oksana, Alicia Fox, Brie Bella, Cameron, Emma, Eva Marie, Layla, Naomi, Natalia, Nikki Bella, Rosa Mendez, Summer Rae, and Tamina. That is 14 other women. So a 15-person invitational match for the Divas Championship, and somehow AJ Lee came away with it. The next night on Raw, of course, Paige would come out and challenge AJ Lee for the title, and Paige would become the youngest Divas Champion ever. Then, of course, the phenomenal main event between Daniel Bryan and Batista and Randy Orton triple threat match for the United WWE World Heavyweight Championship. What is there to say about WrestleMania 30 that hasn't already been said? There are a few duds on this card. The two that come to mind are the John Cena Bray Wyatt match and the women's match, but I think this is solidly A tier. And I am going to put it, I will put it above, I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to put it below 23. I'm sorry. I'll put it above 24. 31. Might be one of my favorite WrestleManias of all time. This was a very underbuilt card. Nobody was looking forward to this WrestleMania. You had the main event between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns that nobody wanted to see. Roman was way overpushed. Everybody was pissed that he won the Royal Rumble that year. And somehow they pulled off one of the best WrestleManias of that decade. You had a lot of duds on the card, though. You had two pre-show matches. You had the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match for the Tag Team Championship. Tyson Kidd and Cesaro defending and defeating Los Matadores, the New Day, in their tag team debut there, and the Usos. Then, of course, in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, you had Damien Mizdow, the last in the ring, apart from the Big Show. And I can't remember, did he eliminate himself? Or did Big Show actually throw him out? I can't remember. But anyways, Big Show won. I don't think he should have won. That was just my opinion, especially at the time. Starting off the actual card, you had the ladder match for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. I think this is one of the best Intercontinental Championship matches in the last 20 years at WrestleMania. Granted, they usually don't defend the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania anymore. But, of course, Daniel Bryan defeating active champion Bad News Barrett. That's, of course, Wade Barrett under his Bad News gimmick. Dean Ambrose as a single star. Dolph Ziggler, Luke Harper, R-Truth, and Cody Rhodes as Stardust. Never forget. Then, of course, the grudge match between Randy Orton and Seth Rollins. This was the RKO out of nowhere. Seth Rollins went for the stomp. Randy Orton threw him up in the air and RKO'd him, and we all thought Seth Rollins was the biggest loser of the night. But there's more to come. Triple H defeated Sting in a very poorly judged match there. Triple H, of course, came out dressed as the Terminator. I didn't think it was that bad, but it was a bad movie. AJ Lee and Paige teamed up to defeat the Bellas in a tag team match, which isn't actually that bad. It's just a few years before Stephanie McMahon had invented women's wrestling, so they're still not quite there, but they're getting close. John Cena defeating Rusev in a match that buried Rusev and shouldn't have happened that way. A lot of these matches were booked incorrectly. Triple H should not have defeated Sting, John Cena should not have defeated Rusev, and The Undertaker should not have defeated Bray Wyatt. But they did, and all three of these people got buried. But then, of course, the main event nobody was looking forward to, Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, which actually was a phenomenal match. Very well put together match. The two were killing it. And then, of course, as the match starts to wind down, you hear Seth Rollins' music. Everybody forgot about Seth Rollins. He comes down with the cash in and the steal and the, what is the call? The heist of the century. Cashing in, almost losing after his cash in, but of course Roman Reigns' family is pissed because they didn't know about it, but Seth Rollins walked away the unexpected World Heavyweight Champion. I love WrestleMania 31, but out of fairness, I am going to put it just above 19. Do I put it above 10? Yes, I am going to put it above 10. Sorry, everybody. I don't like Bret Hart that much. WrestleMania 32 is bad. This was the first Dallas one, of course. This is where they lied that 102,000 people were in the stadium who had all paid, which isn't true. You started off with a fairly forgettable match for the U.S. Championship. I believe this was Ryback's final WrestleMania match. I could be wrong about that, but Kalisto defeated him. Then you had another pre-show match. This was, yet again, before women's wrestling had been invented. Team Total Divas, never forget, which was Alicia Fox, Brie Bella, Eva Marie, Natalya, and Paige, defeating Team Bad and Blonde. Emma, Lana, Naomi, Summer Rae, and Natalya. Only two of those people can wrestle. That's an easy skip. And then the Usos versus the Dudley Boys is yet another skip. So you can skip the entire pre-show if you want to. But the main card starts, Zack Ryder getting his one and only WrestleMania moment. Don't worry, he'll lose the title the next night. But Zack Ryder was one-day Intercontinental Champion, defeating active champion Kevin Owens alongside also Dolph Ziggler, The Miz, Sami Zayn in his WrestleMania debut, Sin Cara, and Cody Rhodes as Stardust. Chris Jericho defeating AJ Styles in AJ Styles' WrestleMania debut. The League of Nations in a six-man tag team match. That's Alberto Del Rio, Rusev, and Sheamus alongside King Barrett, defeating the New Day. Everybody hated the New Day still at this point. They were the hosts of this WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar defeating Dean Ambrose by pinfall in a misjudged no-holds-barred street fight. And then this is where women's wrestling was invented. They forgot to do it on the pre-show, but don't worry, the inaugural WWE Women's Championship, this, of course, would become the Raw Women's Championship by the end of the year. This was Charlotte defeating Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. This match was announced on the day. It was a Divas Championship match up until the day of, and then Lita announced the change of titles, and everybody was happy because Stephanie McMahon gave women permission to wrestle. The goddess herself. Welcome to the queendom, where the kings bow down. Undertaker defeated Shane McMahon in what was actually not a bad match. Had McMahon won, Undertaker would no longer be able to compete at WrestleMania. There was, of course, the added stipulation that if Shane won, he would get to know all of his father's, something about a box, something about secrets, something about family, and it went nowhere and everybody forgot about it. Then, of course, Baron Corbin won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, last eliminating Kane. That really went nowhere. And then The Rock, in the shortest WrestleMania match in history, defeating Eric Rowan. And then the 27-minute main event that nobody wanted to see, Roman Reigns finally defeating Triple H and getting his title belt. This is bad. It's a very bad event. It's probably F tier, but it's the top of F tier. WrestleMania 32, also known as the one with the coolest stage. This is the one with the roller coaster. It's also the one where Randy Orton has semen following him to the ring. 2017, in my opinion, a very good year for wrestling. The match started. There were three matches on the pre-show here. Neville defeating Austin Aries for the Cruiserweight title. Mojo Rawley winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal over Jinder Mahal. This was, of course, the first indication that Rob Gronkowski was coming to WWE. And then Dean Ambrose defeating Baron Corbin in a singles match for the Intercontinental title. You can probably skip all of these except that last one. AJ Styles defeating Shane McMahon in a 20-minute long singles match that was better than expected. Kevin Owens defeating Chris Jericho in a match that should have been the main event. This was, of course, when they broke up after the list of Jericho was ripped apart. Bayley defeating Charlotte Flair, Nia Jax, and Sasha Banks in a match where women's wrestling existed. This was for the Raw Women's title. The Hardy Boys returned after a very, very long absence. They were introduced by the New Day as the third set of challengers for Gallows and Anderson's Raw Tag Team titles. Also in the match were Cesaro and Sheamus, and Enzo Amore and Big Cass. Then, of course, John Cena proposes to Nikki Bella, and they all lived happily ever after they defeated The Miz and Maurice. I think they're happily married with several kids now. Seth Rollins defeating Triple H in an unsanctioned match that I always forget about, even though it was 30 minutes long. Randy Orton defeating Bray Wyatt with bugs. It's forgettable. Brock Lesnar defeating Goldberg in my favorite match in the entire night. It was only 4 3/4 minutes long. But when you see Brock Lesnar straight jump vertically over Goldberg during the spear, I wet my pants every single time. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Then, of course, a palate cleanser, but still not a bad match. Naomi, in front of her home crowd, defeating active SmackDown Women's Champion Alexa Bliss, alongside also Becky Lynch, Carmella, with James Ellsworth, never forget, Mickie James, and Natalya in a 6-pack challenge. And then one of the more controversial booking decisions, Roman Reigns defeating The Undertaker in the main event that took place after midnight, 23 minutes long, and a match that should not have happened. But, of course, the next night on Raw, you get Roman Reigns dropping one of his best promos ever, the "This Is My Yard" speech, where he gets booed for 8 minutes straight. I actually do love that promo. Hype event. Great year for wrestling, but significantly underwhelming when you're looking at what happened at the actual event. I think it's bottom of C tier. And actually, I'm going to put it above 29. I won't put it as high as 5, though. That being said, let's move some of these up. I think some of these deserve to be up in B tier. Yeah, I'm satisfied stopping after 21 right there. Okay, moving on to 34. This was yet another underwhelming WrestleMania, one that was fairly poorly booked. Where are we sitting with time right now? We are sitting on a 1.5 hour long video. So thank you for continuing to watch if you are. WrestleMania 34, the second New Orleans one, the one with the mask. This was the one where a 10-year-old won the tag team championships, but we will get to that. 3 matches on the pre-show. Matt Hardy won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal for no reason. Cedric Alexander defeated Mustafa Ali, for the vacant Cruiserweight Championship, and Naomi winning the inaugural Women's Battle Royal against Bayley. Of course, never forget, this was called the Fabulous Moolah Women's Battle Royal until it was revealed that the Fabulous Moolah was a pimp and other bad things about her. So they had to rename it to just the Women's Battle Royal. Seth Rollins defeated The Miz and Finn Balor in the opening match for the Intercontinental Championship, followed by Charlotte Flair defeating Royal Rumble winner Asuka in a poorly booked match. Asuka absolutely should have gone over in this match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Jinder Mahal winning the United States Championship. Of course, this is the year after he was WWE Champion, never forget. He defeated Randy Orton, Bobby Roode, and Rusev Day in a fatal 4-way match for that. Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey in her first official WWE match, defeating Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. This is actually one of the better matches on the card, believe it or not. I know, it's hard to believe. It's a Ronda Rousey match. Then the Bludgeon Brothers, which is essentially just the remnants of the Wyatt family, defeating the Usos, who were the active SmackDown Tag Team Champions, alongside the New Day, in a triple threat match for those SmackDown Tag Team Championships. You could probably skip this one. It's only 6 minutes long. The Undertaker defeating John Cena in the most confusingly built match on the card. Then, of course, Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon tagging together to defeat Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Yeah, you can skip that one. Nia Jax defeating Alexa Bliss because bullies always get their comeuppance. That was the singles match for the Raw Women's title. AJ Styles defeating Shinsuke Nakamura by nut tap. Actually, Shinsuke Nakamura smacked him in the nuts. Of course, this was also poorly booked. Both Royal Rumble winners should have won. That is, Asuka and Shinsuke Nakamura should have won their respective matches, and Shinsuke Nakamura has never recovered. He has never won a world title in WWE. And then, of course, in the palate cleanser match, 4 minutes long, the active champions, the Ba, were defeated by Braun Strowman and Nicholas Cone. 10-year-old Nicholas Cone, who would vacate the titles the next night. Then, of course, in the main event, one of the longest... Actually, it wasn't that long. It was only 16 minutes long, but the crowd was dead for this one. Brock Lesnar defeating Roman Reigns by pinfall. Yeah, it's not good. Absolutely D tier. Where do I put it? I'll put it above Sergeant Slaughter. Okay. WrestleMania 35. This is the last pre-COVID WrestleMania. It's also the last single night, the final WrestleMania to be held as a one-night event. That's also because it was like 7 hours long, so everybody got home at like 2 in the morning because it was on the East Coast. It's also the WrestleMania where the screen was so bright during the matches that a lot of people in the upper deck could not see. Where's my results here? Okay, 4 matches in the opening, or in the pre-show. You had Tiny Knees defeating Buddy Murphy for the Cruiserweight Championship, the last time the Cruiserweight Championship was defended at WrestleMania. I think this was the year that it switched to NXT as well. Carmella defeated Sarah Logan for the Women's Battle Royal. I think this was the last Women's Battle Royal as well. Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder defeating The Revival to end Kurt Hawkins' losing streak for the Raw Tag Team Championship. And then you had your celebrity involvement in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, Braun Strowman defeating Colin Jost from Saturday Night Live. Yep. First match on the actual card, Seth Rollins comes out and almost passes out because he's so excited. He defeats Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship, which he would hold all the way until Hell in a Cell? Or no, until Saudi Arabia, because that was the year Hell in a Cell was bad. AJ Styles defeating Randy Orton in a singles match to follow that. Don't forget, the Seth Rollins match was only 2.5 minutes long, and it was still a 7-hour event. The Usos retained their SmackDown Tag Team titles against Aleister Black and Ricochet, Rusev and Shinsuke Nakamura, and The Bar. Shane McMahon defeating The Miz in a Falls Count Anywhere match. The Iconics defeating the Boston Hug Connection for the Women's Tag Team Championship. This is, of course, after it was introduced at Elimination Chamber. Also in that match were Nia Jax and Tamina, and Beth Phoenix and Natalya. Talented wrestlers. Kofi Kingston in probably the highlight of the night. This is, of course, when he defeats Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. Kofi Mania ran wild. It was, if you know the backstory, it was supposed to be Mustafa Ali, who got injured prior to the Elimination Chamber, and the fans got so behind Kofi Kingston in the Elimination Chamber that they pushed Kofi Kingston, and I believe he was the first... I might be saying this wrong, so don't quote me, because I can't remember if The Rock ever... I know we just went through it, but I can't remember if The Rock ever won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, but I think he's the first black champion to win the WWE title at WrestleMania. Then Samoa Joe defeated Rey Mysterio in a pretty handily quick match for the U.S. Championship. Roman Reigns defeating Drew McIntyre in a skippable singles match. Triple H defeating Batista in a body horror match. If Triple H would have lost, he would have been forced to retire from in-ring competition. Little did he know. Baron Corbin defeating Kurt Angle in Kurt Angle's last match ever. Yep. Finn Balor defeating Bobby Lashley for the Intercontinental title. And then the main event between Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte Flair. The only time the women have ended a WrestleMania. It's the first time women have main evented WrestleMania. Very underwhelming match. Obviously, the finish was kind of botched. A lot of the spots were not very well put together. It was not a very good match. Despite everything it did for women's wrestling and what it represented, that is great. But the match itself did not live up to the expectations it had. Plus, the crowd was dead. This match took place close to midnight on the East Coast. Overall, not a horrible WrestleMania. I think it's better than the other New York WrestleMania. And I'm going to give it the, I know I use the term benefit of the doubt a lot, but I will put it, if 22 is that high, I better put it above 22. Yep, it's going right there. Right in C tier. All right, COVID Mania. This one... How do you grade this one? You kind of have to grade it on a curve. WrestleMania 36, obviously, this was the one that took place behind closed doors during the pandemic. It was 2 nights long. You had a lot of fun, gimmicky matches on the card. You had a pre-show match between Cesaro and Drew Gulak. The women's tag team match opened with the Kabuki Warriors losing the title to Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. Eliath defeating King Corbin. Becky Lynch should not have defeated Shayna Baszler. Poor booking decision there. Sami Zayn defeating Daniel Bryan to retain the Intercontinental title. John Morrison defeating Jimmy Uso and Kofi Kingston. This was a weird match, right? So this is for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, and I can't remember. It was The Miz who got COVID the day before the match was supposed to be recorded. And obviously, they couldn't record it if he has COVID, so they turned what was supposed to be a 6-person or 3-team triple threat tag team match into a singles match for the tag team titles. So John Morrison representing himself and The Miz, Jimmy Uso representing the Usos, and Kofi Kingston representing the New Day. Morrison retained. Then, of course, Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins faced each other in a who can jump off the highest thing, no disqualification match. Braun Strowman defeating Goldberg for the Universal Championship in a match that was supposed to have Roman Reigns there. Undertaker defeating AJ Styles in the Boneyard match in the main event of Night 1. Then, of course, Night 2, the opening match, Liv Morgan defeating Natalya in a skippable match. Charlotte Flair defeating Rhea Ripley in a Also, misjudged match. Rhea Ripley should have gone over there, but I'm kind of glad she didn't because we have Mommy now. Aleister Black defeating Bobby Lashley in a singles match. Otis defeating Dolph Ziggler for the love of Mandy in a match that would have been way better in front of a crowd. Edge defeating Randy Orton in a way too long last man standing match. Don't worry, they would repeat that match 2 more times, and Edge would get injured at one of them. The Street Profits defeating Angel Garza and Austin Theory in a tag team match for the Raw tag team titles. Bayley defeating Sasha Banks, Lacey Evans, Naomi, and Tamina in a 5-way elimination match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. This would, of course, set up her phenomenal series with best friend Sasha Banks. Then you had Bray Wyatt defeating John Cena in probably my favorite match on the entire card, including the Boneyard match, and that's the Firefly Funhouse match. And then, of course, Drew McIntyre defeating Brock Lesnar in the main event, and for whatever reason, they decided to film Big Show facing off against Drew McIntyre afterwards as well, in a match that was longer than the Brock Lesnar match. You do have to give it a little credit for what it did. It's still not great. Yeah. You know what? I will give it better than 34, and I'll give it better than 8. So I'm going to put it right there, but I won't put it as well as 28. 37 was essentially what 36 should have been. It took place at the original 36 location, which was Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. Another 2-night WrestleMania. Black women were kind of the main story of night 1 in terms of Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks becoming the first pair of black women to headline WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley opened the night against Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship in a match that I thought was very good. 18 and a half minutes long. Of course, the start time of this event was delayed because it was raining so hard. Then Natalya and Tamina won a tag team turmoil match to receive a tag team championship match the following night. This was, of course, when Liv Morgan biffed it on her way to the ring, which was really funny. Then Cesaro defeating Seth Rollins by pinfall in a singles match. AJ Styles and Omos defeating The New Day for the Raw Tag Team titles. Braun Strowman defeating Shane McMahon in a You're Stupid match. It was a steel cage match that the primary story was Shane McMahon didn't think Braun had a brain. Bad Bunny and Damian Priest in one of the best celebrity involvement matches in WrestleMania history, defeating The Miz and John Morrison. And then, of course, that main event, Bianca Belair winning by whipping her hair back and forth like Willow Smith, defeating Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's title. Night 2, you had Randy Orton defeating The Fiend and his box-like structure in a bad match. Very bad match. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler defeating Natalya and Tamina by technical submission to retain the tag team championship. This is the only time Tamina has ever been cheered in a match in her entire life. Kevin Owens defeating Sami Zayn in a grudge match alongside Logan Paul, never forget. He would come back and shock the world the following year. Sheamus defeating Riddle for the U.S. title. Apollo Crews defeating Big E for the Intercontinental title in a Nigerian drum fight that did not feature a single Nigerian drum. Rhea Ripley defeating Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship in a great match. And then, of course, the tremendous main event, 22 and a half minutes long, Roman Reigns stacking Edge and Daniel Bryan together to win by pinfall to continue the reign of the Tribal Chief because he the one. Of course, Daniel Bryan, this was his not quite last match. He would have one more match against Roman Reigns on SmackDown, if not the week later, then a few weeks later. And then he would go straight to AEW and have a match against Kenny Omega that year. So great year for Daniel Bryan, his last big showing on WWE TV. I think 37, despite having a limited crowd, I think 37 is absolutely a B-tier event. I am going to put it just below 26. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it above 26. 26 was fairly boring. And then 38. This was last year, of course. 2 nights in Dallas. You had Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out of retirement to face Kevin Owens. We started off, where are we going here? No pre-show. We just went straight into the Usos defeating Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs. This was the match that Boogs snapped his quad in half, trying to lift both Usos. We would see him out for nearly a year, of course. Drew McIntyre defeating Happy Corbin in a singles match. The Miz and Logan Paul defeating Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio. Logan Paul had one of the best celebrity showings ever. You saw him pull off the Three Amigos on top of Rey Mysterio and Dominic. Bianca Belair defeating Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship in a kind of a makeup match for her loss at SummerSlam. Cody Rhodes returned to WWE after years away, reinventing himself, defeating Seth freaking Rollins in a 22-minute match that would start their three-way series that would culminate in their Hell in a Cell match with Cody Rhodes having a massive, I suppose it was this arm, but massive torn pectoral muscle, obviously starting his return to WrestleMania this year. Charlotte Flair defeating Ronda Rousey in probably the right call. They would go on to face each other again at WrestleMania Backlash, where Ronda Rousey would win the title. This was for the SmackDown Women's title. And then, of course, you had the KO show segment with Steve Austin that turned into a 14-minute no-holds-barred match. Everybody loved night one. Night two started a little lackluster. RK Bro defeating the Street Profits and Alpha Academy to retain in a triple threat tag team match. Bobby Lashley defeating Omos in a singles match. Johnny Knoxville defeating Sami Zayn in an anything goes match. This was one of the best comedy matches in WWE history. Of course, everybody from the Jackass crew getting involved. And then Sasha Banks and Naomi defeating Carmella and Queen Zelina, Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, and Natalya and Shayna Baszler in a fatal four-way match for the Women's Tag Team Championship. Of course, I think less than a month later, they would drop the belts on John Laurinaitis' desk and disappear. Naomi hasn't been seen since. Sasha Banks left WWE. She is now in New Japan as of me recording this. She is the active IWGP Women's Champion as Mercedes Money. Edge defeating AJ Styles, his first match really back. This was the start of the Judgment Day, because on the other side and all of that stuff, this is when he would turn into Dark Edge. And then Sheamus and Ridge Holland defeating the New Day. I can't remember if this was before or after. This was after Ridge Holland destroyed Big E's neck, and so this had a lot of weight on it for the New Day. They would, of course, lose. Then Pat McAfee in his WrestleMania debut defeating Austin Theory, but don't worry, he would go on to lose to Mr. McMahon immediately after. And then in the main event to unify the WWE and Universal titles, Roman Reigns, the Tribal Chief, we the ones, of course, defeating Brock Lesnar, the WWE Champion, by pinfall. All in all, a phenomenal event. This was back on track for WrestleMania. This is the best WrestleMania in several years, and I'm tempted to put it A tier. I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of A tier. Now, I might come back and revisit this. I won't necessarily reorder them, but I think these tiers are fairly accurate. I want to put more in S tier, but I don't know with the way that I have things ranked that I can. So let's just go through what we have here from bottom to top. F tier from the very bottom, WrestleMania 27, bad. WrestleMania 9, bad. WrestleMania 32, bad. Moving up to D tier, bottom of D tier, we have WrestleMania 2, followed by, above that, WrestleMania 7, WrestleMania 34, WrestleMania 8, WrestleMania 36, the COVID one, WrestleMania 28, the Miami one, the once-in-a-lifetime match. And then top of D tier, we have WrestleMania 25, the 24th anniversary. C tier is pretty packed. We have WrestleMania 11, WrestleMania 29, WrestleMania 33, which isn't as good as you remember. WrestleMania 5, WrestleMania 15, WrestleMania 6, WrestleMania 22, WrestleMania 35, WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 4. Moving up to B tier. Bottom of B tier, we have WrestleMania 21, WrestleMania 26, WrestleMania 37, WrestleMania 16. That's 14. WrestleMania 2000, which was 16. WrestleMania 13. WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 12. Then we move up to A tier. We have WrestleMania 38, this one just passed. WrestleMania 20, WrestleMania 19, WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 31, WrestleMania 24, WrestleMania 30, WrestleMania 23, and top of A tier, we have WrestleMania X8 or 18. And then the only one I have in S tier, which kind of pains me actually, we have WrestleMania X7. Let me know what you think, what should be changed, what your order looks like, where things should be moved to in terms of if everything's in the right tier or the right order. Feel free to argue with me as much as you want. Above my right shoulder, your top left corner, you're going to see a link to the channel. We have plenty of content, wrestling related, non-wrestling related, sports content, non-sports content, everything you can think of. So go like, share, and subscribe by following that link there. If you're interested in our other channel where I do all things audiobooks and other video projects, above my left shoulder, your top right corner, is going to be a link to Echo Worm, that second channel. And then right here in the bottom right corner is going to be a link to other wrestling content. Go check that out ahead of WrestleMania this weekend. But in the meantime, enjoy WrestleMania 38, enjoy NXT Stand and Deliver, and enjoy all things wrestling ahead of this weekend. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, we will see you very, very soon.